Hi friends, my name is Shawne Arceneaux, but you can call me Shawne. I'm a board-certified nurse coach and holistic healer, and I want to help you transform your life in a way that feels in total alignment with your heart and who you truly are. Each week, I'll be sharing with you my tips on how to become more empowered in your own wellness journey and create a vibrant, fulfilling life that reflects your values and your truth. You'll hear insightful interviews on different life and wellness topics and stories from myself and other beautiful souls who share my mission of spreading love and light in this sometimes dark world. My hope for this podcast is that you will walk away feeling inspired and more aligned in your purpose. This is your permission to get curious and lean into your intuition as we all learn and grow together. Welcome to the Aligned and Well podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Aligned and Well podcast. It is Shawne here, your host. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Jennie Lynn. Jennie is a women's relationship coach, a board-certified nurse coach, and the founder of Evolving Heart. She supports women in learning how to cultivate true self-love, heal from their past, and sustain healthy relationships. She works with women one-on-one and also hosts workshops and corporate wellness events. So we're going to talk a little bit about self-love and how it can transform your life, healthy communication and embracing vulnerability, dating and relationships from an authentic place. So we're going to talk about all things relationships today, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, Jennie, I'm so excited to have you on the Aligned and Well podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I have been loving your podcast. So to be a guest, I'm super honored. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Well, before we get into anything, can you just tell my listeners a little bit about you, who you are, what you're about?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jennie Lynn. I'm a board certified nurse coach, and I really specialize in supporting women with their relationships. So that's really my wheelhouse. And
Yeah.
I got into that specialty after a lot of relationship struggles and just a lot of heartbreak and all the defeating patterns. And my own life has really guided me to support women in this way, which is really beautiful. And so
Mm,
my business name is called Evolving Heart. And
yeah.
I love that because it's really about like that growth through love and, how our relationships are really always inviting us to learn more about ourselves, about connection. And so that's my
Mhm.
absolute favorite thing. And so I work with women one on one, and really like kind of three pillars that I focus on with my clients is really learning and building a strong foundation of true self love, really
Mm.
healing and releasing the past, and then creating and sustaining healthy relationships.
Oh, that is so beautiful. And I don't think that people think about relationships in terms of
Mhm.
a big part of our health, like
Yeah.
relationships, not just romantic relationships, but relationships
Yeah.
in general. So what kind of prompted you to go this route? I know you said a little bit about having your own journey and having your own
Mhm.
struggles with different types of relationships. And so, yeah, just I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like there's kind of two aspects to my story that were like kind of preparing me for this. Of course, you don't realize it at the time because all you know is, "Oh, wow, I'm really struggling right now."
Mhm.
But I had been in like defeating relationship patterns for as long as I could remember, and specifically struggled with like I didn't know the terms then, but like narcissistic
Mm,
men, emotionally unavailable men, which takes a toll on your confidence.
mhm.
So I had kind of like uprooted my life and moved across the country and hoped to kind of start over and experience some new relationships. And I
Mm.
did that without any internal work. I just like changed my environment, right?
Yeah.
And I moved to like sunny California, and I was like, everything will work now. And I learned very quickly that no, that it's not that simple. I kind of recreated my life from the East Coast within like 2 months of this move. I was dumped again, like out of
Mhm.
nowhere, ghosted, heartbroken. And I'm like, what the heck is it going to take? You know?
Mhm. Mhm.
But that opened my eyes. I really realized that it's about going internally. And it was the first time I kind of looked in the mirror and was like, okay, what's your part in this? So that kind of experience awoken the like self-love journey for me.
Mhm.
Um, and I learned that I like really didn't think that I was worth very much. And I learned that I actually didn't love myself very much because I was tolerating terrible treatment for years. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like the first phase one of like the self-love piece. But I also had, after I worked on myself for a bit, I actually experienced a great relationship. And
Mhm.
I think for many women, we think once I'm in the relationship, everything will just be easy and I'm good. And
Mm,
like it's almost
mhm.
like I made it. I'm good now.
Yeah.
But then I realized like that healthy relationship was actually the most triggering for me and the most difficult for me because I wasn't used to it. So it was like
Wow. Yeah.
I couldn't receive it. I was sabotaging it. I was not present and I kept projecting my past without realizing it. So that experience and after that relationship ended, my eyes were open to like, wow, I like missed that whole relationship because I was in the
Mm.
past.
Mhm.
So both of those, and there's so much more, obviously more details here, but both of those like
Yeah.
life events were really building the foundation for my business. It's like the self-love piece and the healing piece around the past, I think are so important.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can imagine how many women are listening to this or will listen to this and relate so deeply with that, right? Of like not
Mhm,
like the experience of having a relationship that is damaging and then also experiencing like a really great relationship and not being able
mhm,
to hold it, not being able to receive it or be in it
mhm,
because there are all of these things that we haven't really healed from, all of these old wounds. Whenever you up and moved, right? Like what
mhm.
was your thought process of, okay, I'm going to change my environment, I'm going to start over. And then whenever you get there, what happens? Like how did you rebuild from this
Yeah.
previous life?
Yeah, so I had moved from Connecticut to California, and I had had a huge falling out. I had primarily male friendships at that time,
Yeah.
um, and I really thought that they were, like, my best friends,
Mhm.
and I kinda learned the hard way that, no, not really, and I was kind of a doormat, but I chose that, and that's the thing, so I don't when I share about this, I never wanna paint the impression that I'm just, hating on these people or blaming because it's not that, like, and growth is really about asking the questions like, why did you tolerate that? And these
Mhm.
were the questions I started to ask. But I was in such a defeated, broken place before that move. But when I first moved, I think it's easy to move to San Diego and be like, life is great, So
Yeah.
I had like 2 months of bliss because I was meeting new people. The sun was shining. I was just like, I'm in paradise. I mean, this looks like a postcard. So
Mhm.
um and then when I connected with this guy that I had met there within just a couple months and we hit it off, it actually started to validate that all I had to do was move to be happy.
Mm, mhm.
So that was like, it was just very validating. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I just had to leave these bad guys and move. And now I'll be happy and everything will just work. And it felt like that. It felt like I was in this flow state. I met this guy. We spent like the whole weekend together. He was like, inviting me to everything. Like, I mean, I now know that I was being love bombed,
Right.
but I didn't know these things
Yes.
then. I just knew I was so happy. Like, I was like, oh my God, this is so easy. This is like amazing. He made me feel so special. And he went really deep in. He really was validating like deep insecurities that I hadn't shared with anyone and
Yeah.
just led me to believe, yeah, that we were going to be in a relationship. And I actually called my mom up like crying because I was so happy. I was like, I can't
Mhm.
believe and then she validated me. She's like, "You went through so much stuff in Connecticut with men, and like now look where you are." And I was like,
Mhm.
"I'm so happy." And then like the next day, he ghosted me. Like,
Mm.
so I went from like high to like anxious. I think
Yeah.
I spent a full week, probably the most anxious I ever. I felt like my life was just crumbling because the question in my brain was like, wait, how is this happening again? How is this happening again?
Yeah.
This can't be happening to me. So I was kind of in shock and I kept trying to talk to him and I was like, hey, what's going on? Cause I'm like, if this happens to me now again, like I just moved 3,000 miles. So what the heck's the deal?
Yeah.
Um, so I had to really fall down hard first. And
Mhm.
once that was over, and he was just done. He removed me off social media. Like, and I'm analyzing our last weekend, like, what did I do? What did I say? What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
right? All my stuff is coming up. It was very triggering. And I really
Yeah.
was like, I'll never be happy. Like, I'm looking out my window. I'm like, look where you live and you're still not happy.
Mm, mhm.
So it
Yeah.
was very hard for me. It wasn't until but I mean, I got to a point where I'm like, well, because how old was I then? Almost 30. I don't even think
Mhm.
I turned 30. I was 29. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, I have a lot of life left. So what am I going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got to
Totally.
figure this out, you know?
Yeah. One of the things that really stood out to me as you were talking earlier was that realization that because you said something about like I'm not trying to blame anyone or anything like
Hmm.
that. I really had to
Yeah.
take a look in the mirror and figure out okay, what was my part in this? And I think that's
Hmm.
a struggle that a lot of women go through about like whenever it comes to relationships. Anytime anything goes wrong, even if you're in a good relationship and
Hmm.
something like brings up old stuff, we immediately like look to the external for validation. We
Yeah.
immediately look to our external circumstances or environment or relationships that we already have or people to kind of feed this, narrative that we have in our heads of like, why is it
Hmm.
happening to me? I don't understand
Yeah.
why. And so what was the shift for you in that
Yeah.
whenever you took that mirror out? What was it that shifted that perspective for you?
Hmm. Yeah. So I think I did get to a point because I really did like fall off. Like my coworkers were worried about me. I was
Yeah.
just like barely functioning. But I got to a point where it was like, well, I want to be happy. Like, so
Mhm.
yeah, so what am I gonna do? And the first thing that I did was open my mind. Like I realized I was kind of more closed-minded before this. So I started being like,
Mhm.
okay, well, I'm in San Diego. Like it's more kind of healing kind of world there. And there's like Reiki and meditation and things like that.
Yeah.
A friend, and this is why I just don't believe anything is a coincidence. A friend actually accidentally had texted me this mentor's name, but she meant to send a message to someone else. And she's like, "Oh, I had the best call with
Wow.
Nicole, and she helped me." And I was like, "Wait, did you mean to send that to me?" And she's like, "No," but I was in such a low place that I said, "What's her number?"
Yeah.
To know who this woman was. And she lived in North Carolina. Like, it was so random, but it's not. It's all meant to be.
Yeah.
Fast forward, Nicole's like one of my best friends now. But I booked like a FaceTime call with her, and I was just like, my life is over. I was so devastated, and
Mhm.
she asked me if I loved myself, and I was like, of course I love myself. I'm
Right.
super nice. I would do anything for anyone. I'm like, I've got a good job. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not the ugliest. I'm not the ugliest person. Like, I'm not like gorgeous, but I'm okay. Like, of course I love myself. She was like, okay, So these are
Yeah.
the reasons why I love myself, right? This is where I was at. And the first thing she said was like, are those reasons you love yourself or are those reasons why you think someone else should
Yeah.
love you?
Mm.
And I said, well, that's a good question.
Yeah, very different
Um,
question. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that kinda made me go, "Huh," and then she asked me she's like, "I'm just curious, if you really loved yourself, like, why would you allow yourself to be treated this way? Treated so badly for so long, and you still wanted to work out with this guy?" Because I still did. I was like, "Do you think he'll come back?" Like,
No.
seriously?
Yeah.
So that really blew my mind when she asked me that question. I was like, hold on, I have to rethink my whole life. Why do I allow people to treat me really bad and I like stick around and I bend over backwards for them? So that it really took like that outside person kind of reflection back to me.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think every person has to have that moment of
Mhm.
realization, because whenever you were saying all of those things, these are all of the reasons why I love myself. If we close our eyes and you say those things out loud, those don't actually land, right? Like they're yeah, they're great
No.
qualities, but they're
Right.
not
Yeah.
why somebody loves themselves
Yeah.
or anyone else. And
Right.
so it sounds like the definition of self-love was totally redefined in this moment. So like what is your perspective
Yes.
now? What does self-love actually mean? And how does that
Mhm.
translate into relationships whenever you are pursuing one?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like where I like to start with self love, because I think this is eye opening for people, is saying take a look at how you treat and talk to yourself versus how you treat and talk to people you love in your life. And I
Mhm.
want you to like look at that gap because I
Mhm.
guarantee it's so different.
Yeah.
So even down to like the way we judge ourselves and are critical of ourselves, like we would never say the things we say to ourselves to other people. We would be empathetic and comforting and compassionate. And it's like where is that given to ourselves? It's
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
so I love to start with that. I really think that it's about like honoring and treating yourself with the same love that you easily express and give to others. Um, and it's really about loving yourself through the wide range of emotions, through each aspect of life. So, can you love yourself when you fall off your routines? Can you love
Mhm.
yourself if you've gained some weight? Can you love yourself like if
Yeah.
you're not getting things done? Because
Mhm.
most of the time, I think we view this like we love ourselves when, like, oh, yeah, well, I've been meal prepping and exercise and I'm so productive. And so I'm worth that now. But it's like true self love is loving yourself even when you feel like you're at your lowest. It's still giving
Yeah.
yourself that compassion.
Yeah. Which I think can be hard for a lot of people, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's the hardest thing.
it is hard to, and for a lot of people that listen to this podcast, people identify as people pleasers, as
Hmm.
givers, right? Like many other people who are listening to this podcast are typically in the healing space, so they like to give and help other people, and it can be really hard to do that for ourselves. And I think
Yeah.
self-love is a word that a lot of people kind of roll their eyes at now, right? Like it's a
Hmm.
very,
Yeah.
it's a buzzword in like the self-development, healing kind of space. And so
Yep.
I mean, if somebody doesn't love themselves, and maybe they haven't even like totally admitted it out loud, maybe it's
Hmm.
just like an internal thing and maybe they're not completely aware of it. What's the process of starting to change that relationship with self for you?
Hmm. Yeah, I think on the most like basic starting point, it's really about self connection and how you can start to connect with yourself, even in the smallest ways. Because
Mhm.
if we think about even like what it takes to love someone else, it's like, well, you're going to be connecting with them, you're going to be getting to know them in some
Mhm.
form. So it's like, how can I start to actually connect with who I am? I think that taking a look at where you can prioritize that is life changing and honestly was one of the biggest things for me when I would just spend 15 minutes with myself like in the morning before my day.
Yeah.
That was actually one of the number one things that transformed my life. If I had to stick with just one practice, it would be a morning practice.
Yeah.
Um, because you kind of wake up and are like, "Hey, I actually come first, and I'm gonna show myself that I come first and that I'm worthy of this time, just as the rest of my day is deserving of my time, I actually am." And like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna connect myself, listen to myself, be with myself, and then you're cultivating self-trust when you're following through with that. And that self-trust has you feeling confident with time. Like that to me, like it's the connection piece that's the foundation for it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like human connection is the foundation of any
Yeah.
relationship, especially with yourself, because I don't know if people like are aware of how much internal dialogue there actually is, especially the older you get, right? Because then you have all of these
Mhm,
past experiences that you're pulling from that create this internal dialogue between all of the different parts of you, maybe parts that were like
mhm,
frozen in time from being extremely traumatized or dumped in a really abrupt way or
mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
And then we get to allow all those parts to come to the surface in that alone time, in that connection with self, like you're talking about, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that and that's where I typically start with each client as well is like take like I like to call it like self-love rituals or like
Mhm.
self-connection practices and you get to have fun with it too. And I also recognize it's not about like let me spend 2 hours with myself. And I know some people have kids and there's a lot of factors, but it looks
Yeah.
different for everyone. It's not just like everyone does this regimented thing, but it's more about how can you be like so devoted and committed to yourself and show up regardless. If that's 5 minutes, if that's taking 3 deep breaths, maybe that's all you do have time for. But I like to get curious around it because I used to say, well, I don't have time. I don't have time. But it's like, why is every other part of my life so deserving of my time, but I'm not? Like, can
Yeah.
we again start to show ourselves first that we're
Mhm.
worth it?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like so much of that is easier said than done, right? Because like, what do you find
Yes.
stands in the way of people just not putting the time and energy? What's like the big, deeper thing that might be underneath that avoidance
Mhm.
of spending time with yourself?
Yeah, well, I think that, 99.9% of us are growing up learning how to be with ourselves. I think it can, and I think that's why even speaking kindly to yourself, it's like, well, that doesn't sound natural or that sounds corny or, oh, what's it really going to do to say, no, you're doing great right now and you're amazing and I believe in you. Oh, that sounds weird. Right, because it's different. And I think we're just not used to it. I don't think we grow up learning these things. I think also that a lot of people are afraid to slow down because I think there's a resistance to fully feeling what emotions may arise, in
Yeah,
in that
yeah.
space.
That's what I think of
So
immediately, the fear of what will come up in the alone time, and
mm,
I think now not so much, but before I used to do this all the time. I spent most of my life I've only dated 2 people in my entire life,
mhm,
one
mhm,
ex-boyfriend in college and my now husband, and so
yep,
up until my, you know, up until my, like, early 20s, I had been single for that entire
mhm,
time and constantly worried about, like, why won't people date me? Just I don't
mhm,
understand what's wrong. Like, I'm a really awesome person.
mhm,
I've got a lot of friends. Everybody tells me I'm
yep,
so nice. Like, what is happening?
yeah,
And so I think there was like a period of time, I think after my first boyfriend broke up with me, I had spent a lot of time alone. I was like living by myself in this tiny dorm room in college and nursing
yep,
school. And I had so much time by myself. And that was such a scary time for me because
yeah,
mentally I like was not okay.
yeah,
And
mhm,
so whenever you're talking about like fears of what might arise during that time,
mhm,
that's kind of what was happening to me, but in a forced way. Like I was forced to be by myself
yeah,
because I really didn't have
yeah,
anyone else. My family lived away um and I was just kinda, like, on my own, but if I didn't have that, I don't
mhm,
think I would have developed the growth that needed to
yeah,
happen for me to, like, meet my husband and
yeah,
actually be in that relationship and have it be, like, a good, healthy, strong
yeah.
relationship, you know?
Yeah, and I think that what you just touched on right there, it's like, okay, well, that time really served me to then, like, have this healthy marriage that I'm in now because I think that and it's a great question to really ask, like, if you're single and wanting a partnership, why do you want that partnership? Now,
Yeah.
most people are like, "Well, duh, I wanna be in love, or I want to experience love, and I want" like, it's easy to come up with that, but really sit with that because I know for me, it was, "Okay, well, once someone chooses me, I'll feel good enough, or then I won't have to feel bad about myself," or, I think a lot of times there are these voids internally that we're looking for someone else to really fix,
Yeah,
And
totally.
a lot of this is subconscious too. Like most people, I think a lot of people don't have this awareness, but I think that's why
Mhm.
I see so much like codependency in relationship as well because if you're not solid on your own and you don't have this like strong sense of self-trust and confidence,
Mhm.
well, there probably won't be that much room in your relationship for the true connection and security and safety and intimacy and all the things that we want and that we're
Yeah.
meant for. Like that's what relationships get to be. But when
Yeah.
you're going into them from like a place of, hey, I don't even actually accept myself. I won't spend 10 minutes just with myself. But then we're asking someone else to, go to the moon for us. Right.
Yeah.
But are we willing to do that for ourselves first? Like that is such a game changer.
Mhm. Yeah. It's like we have to lead with our own actions and the way that we treat ourselves first before we can expect somebody else to do that. And like you said, a lot of people I don't think don't have the awareness of what
Hmm.
actually subconsciously is happening. Um,
Yeah.
and so
Yep.
how do you kind of help like whenever you start working with someone, how do you help create that pathway for them to develop this intense like self-trust and connection with themselves and open themselves up for a really beautiful relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone is so complex. So there's definitely not like a one size fits all, but I think that there's themes that come up with each client. So
Yeah.
definitely around starting with self. And honestly, I work with women in relationships as well. And it's ironic that the women that come to me like in relationships and they're like, well, I need help with X, Y, and Z in my relationship. And half the time probably more, we work on the relationship to themselves, and then their relationship improves as a byproduct. Because
Yeah.
I'm like, this is where it starts.
Yeah.
I had one client that was married and, was having communication struggles and all this stuff. And then we worked on herself and she was like, "Oh my God, I feel so much closer to my husband." She's like, "I don't feel like we
Yeah.
touched on that." I'm like, "No, we did, just like
Yeah.
magic." Like exactly.
Right, right.
So yeah, it's fun to share that. But yeah, I think that the foundation of the self-love, the self-trust, there's different pillars within that. It's really taking a look at, the self-connection through the routines, taking a look at boundaries. But when I say boundaries, and I got this phrase from a coach I worked with, she had reframed them as agreements to self. So coming
Mm,
back to like, what are you available for in each, area of your life, right?
yeah. I love that. I
For
love that wording.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because boundaries sounds like stay away, but this is actually like, oh, it's not even about you. It's about just agreements that I have with myself around friendships or relationships, right? We're getting clear on all of
Mhm.
that, so that we can set a framework for that. Because I think too, when people approach relationships, it's just like, well, okay, whoever, like, whatever, whoever will choose me, or whatever it is. Or some people are so specific, and then it's like we're not open enough. So it's like taking a look at like the non-negotiables and what really will work for you.
Mhm.
And getting to know like your true authentic self, I think is a huge component too, because if you want to be loved for who you are, you're gonna need to know who you are and be who
Yeah.
you are, which is like these sound so simple, but they're not.
Yeah.
Like they're not.
Yeah.
So
There's a piece of that so when it comes to being your authentic self in a relationship, because I think I mean, speaking from personal experience, I definitely became a person that thought other people would find attractive, or other people that like,
mhm,
would want to be in a relationship with. And whenever I had nobody wanting to date me, I was like, okay, obviously this is not working. What's happening? And so
mhm,
you really have to look at yourself and be like, okay, who actually am I though? Right? Because you can compare yourself to
yeah,
so many people. Like,
yeah,
how do you differentiate who you actually are, like who your authentic self is on your own and in a relationship
mhm,
versus, I guess it's a mask, right? Like versus the mask that you
yeah,
put on to attract
mhm.
whoever it is you're trying to attract.
Yeah, I think a great starting point is to identify like how do you feel when you're your authentic self, and who are you around when you feel that way. So you're
Mm,
authentic, and maybe you're not as connected to that, but like, okay, if I was my authentic self, I could feel at peace. I could feel free. I could feel relaxed. I could
mhm.
feel like easily expressing myself. Or maybe when I'm inauthentic, or in relationships that have me feeling that way, I'm anxious or I'm afraid to speak up. Like, so kind of
Yeah.
identifying like how you could feel first, and start to notice where are you allowed to be that, not allowed, but like where do you feel like you're allowed to be that person. And
Mhm.
for me, it was not a lot of people, and I
Mhm.
made peace with that at first. And a lot of people did fall out of my life, but it was a gift for me and them, because it wasn't like serving either of us. And it made
Yeah.
space for like the most beautiful, I mean, like the most amazing, not only, romantic relationships, but
Yeah.
friendships as well. And that was a game
Yeah.
changer for loving myself, when you've got like the right women in your life that are like lifting you up and supporting you, and it's like
Mhm.
a true aligned match.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was big for me as well.
I love that you mentioned who you're around and who, like what that sparks
Mhm,
in you, because I do think that the people you surround yourself with play a huge role in your relationship
mhm.
to yourself. If you're constantly around people that are like undermining you and like making rude
Yeah.
comments and cracking jokes at you that are supposed to be funny but they're actually like digs at your character,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
that really takes like it takes a toll on you, and it starts to also like rewrite that self-talk that goes on in your head
Mhm.
without really you
Yes.
even noticing that. And so having people around you that are constantly accepting you for who you are, holding you accountable, and also just being okay with all of you, every single part of
Yeah.
you. I saw this clip actually the other day, so it's like perfect timing for this interview.
Yep.
But it was a clip, and I don't know if it was from a movie or something, but it was this actress, and they were her and her husband were like having this conversation. She was asking him, "Why do you think people get married?" And he said some like really superficial answer. And she's like, "No,
Mhm.
we get one life. people want
Mhm.
a witness to their lives. Like whenever somebody is in a relationship, like marriage, or even just like a really deep connected
Mhm.
relationship, this person is telling you, I'm here for it all. I'm here to be a witness to
Mm.
you, so that whenever
Yeah.
we go, like, we get remembered. And I just
Mhm.
thought that was a beautiful way to talk about relationships, because
Yeah.
um, it's not so we can feel loved. It's not so we can check off X, Y, and Z on our life
Yes.
trajectory list,
Yep.
but it's so that
Totally.
we can be witnessed. And I don't, it was just a really, really cool, like I rewatched it several times and I was just like,
Mhm.
wow, I felt that.
Yeah, that's such a unique perspective as well. I feel like I haven't, like, heard that description,
Mhm.
but I love that, yeah, because I think that there's so much around just growing up in the fairy tales and the
Mhm.
storybooks and all of that, and I think that it is programmed into our brains, as women that, like, someone's gonna come in and save you, and someone's gonna sweep you off your feet, and you'll
Yeah.
just and that's it, and, like, I'm not saying there doesn't get to be, like, romance and all of the things, like, of course, but I just think
Mhm.
it can instill a message of you're not complete without
Yeah.
another,
Yeah.
and I think that's how I lived most of my life is like, "Oh my god, where is this person? Where is this person so that I can be happy?" And it's like, "Okay,
Mhm.
how can I only really be available for, this, like, epic, beautiful love that I know I deserve, but in the meantime, how can I
Mhm.
create a life that's so beautiful and amazing and happy on my own, and not from a place
Mhm.
of hyper independence, and I don't need a relationship, I don't need anyone."
Right.
No, it's like, we're born for that, and that type of mindset doesn't serve us either, but it's like,
Mhm.
cool, what did I wanna do in the meantime before that, relationship comes in? There's like, you can be so happy,
Yes.
like, I'm gonna be 35, and I think there's so many women too that are like, you know, by this age, and, it's like, what
Yeah,
if you embraced your own timelines? Because that is
totally.
where the magic is. Yep.
When you think about how many women out there spend all of their time and energy trying to manifest a relationship and are not working on themselves at the same time, how much time you're wasting there, because like you said, there is so much of life to experience. And while you're waiting for this like epic beautiful love, let's create that in our own
Mhm.
lives. Like there's ways that
Yeah.
you can feel the same way
Yeah.
and create
Mhm.
those magical moments by yourself. Whenever I think about the first time I went somewhere by myself,
Mhm.
it teaches you so much about you, and it also teaches you so much
Mhm.
about the world, how you relate to it, what your opinions are, like, and those
Yeah.
are the kind of conversations you're having with someone when you're in a relationship too. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, life gets to still be great, and it doesn't mean that you are ignoring your desires and are like, "Oh, okay, I have to not want a relationship." Like, no, like, let's honor that
Yeah.
desire, but take a look at like, there's so much to take a look at, like,
Mhm.
aside from that. There's, like, let's look at look at your relationship to self. Let's take a look at actually, this is a great analogy here. If
Yeah.
whatever you believe in, God, the universe, and it doesn't even have to be from that sense. It's just like if someone was, like, handing you your person on a platter right now,
Mhm.
what do you think is in the way of you actually being able to take it and have it in your life? Because
Mhm.
it's like, is it an ex you're still hanging on to? Is it a belief from your childhood? Is it X, Y, and Z pattern that you keep repeating? Is it that you're not happy with yourself? Life wants to give it to you. And so
Mhm.
sometimes it's a matter of timing, but also there's typically many blocks in the way. And my life was a great example of that. Like, yeah, I got the healthy relationship, but I couldn't receive it because I was still
Yeah.
living in my past?
Yeah. Yeah, can you expand on that a little bit more? What did you find hard to receive in that healthy relationship?
Yeah, and definitely at that time, I wouldn't have even used the phrase, "Oh, I can't receive this." Like, I wasn't, like, deep into this work yet,
Yeah.
but now I know for sure.
Yeah.
But no matter what he did, I didn't believe he cared about me. It was like
Mhm.
this he treated me like gold, and I'm not painting this picture like, "Oh, he was perfect and I ruined it." Like, no, this was meant to teach me, and he had his flaws, but,
Right.
yeah, he would go above and beyond. This was during the pandemic as well. Things were a little heightened. I remember
Yeah.
he went to like visit a friend of his that was another woman, and she lived alone. It was very like isolated and getting depressed during the pandemic. So he went and brought her like some takeout. And in my mind, because I'm thinking he's just like all these men that I've already, had these connections with that were unhealthy, in my mind, I'm like, okay, oh my God, like what if something happens between them? Or he's probably telling me this, da 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 da. And I'd want to like, investigate this whole thing when
Mhm.
come to find out, I actually ended up being really good friends with her. And I remember she told me, um, because I actually lived with this partner and then he had moved. She had told me after he moved, oh my God, like you were all he talked about. He was just like,
Mm.
even when you guys were fighting, he was like, but Jennie, she's so amazing and stuff.
Yeah.
And here I am trying to be a detective and my mind is spiraling with anxious thoughts of like what's happening, da 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 da, that like I'm just missing that he just cares. So
Yeah.
it was a disbelief that he actually cared, and I actually rejected him unknowingly as well, and that really led to us breaking up, but he had moved, from California back to the East Coast and had asked me pretty directly if I would move back,
Yeah.
and, uh, I was too afraid to say how I felt because
Yeah.
deep deep down, I didn't believe someone would actually want to be with me. And I didn't know that at the time. I just
Mhm.
said to him, "Oh, like, let's talk about it later."
Mhm.
And he kind of put himself out there, and I was just like, "Oh, I don't know. We'll talk about it." And then that kind of triggered him. And then he was like, walls up,
Yeah.
and the relationship ended from there. So, pretty much what it looked like was spiraling anxious thoughts, like not being able to just feel like settled and secure, even though there were no red flags. There was no reason not to trust him. It was just that
Yeah.
I didn't believe that I could.
Whenever that relationship was done, what was your process of reflecting on everything that happened, reflecting on yourself, and kind of
Mhm.
diving deeper into, like, your own self-growth and your own self-development?
Yeah. Yeah, after that, I was really heartbroken. I felt a ton of regret. I realized, like, that I just, like, missed all of this, and then I was so desperate to get that back because I was like, "Wait, now I just know I wasn't present. Like, can we just, like, do this again?" And, like, I kinda went back into an anxious state and kind of
Mhm.
abandoned myself and, kept things casual with him because I felt like, "Oh, we'll go back. We'll go back." But that's not how it works, and it's such a good example of, like, how we feel about ourselves and how we honor ourselves is, like, mirrored back to us. Because when I was
Mhm.
confident and full of self-love, I had a healthy partner who treated me well. But when we broke up and I was like, "I'll just take what I can get," because he
Mhm.
went into avoidant place and he was like, "We can just, like, be friends and be casual." I was like, "Oh, okay," because 'cause I'm like, "Let me cling to anything that I can get,
Yeah.
to have him to not lose him." All my abandonment stuff came up, but once I abandoned myself, like,
Mhm.
he was not treating me the same. Now he's treating me how I'm treating myself, so it's, like, interesting how that worked, but,
Mhm.
then I couldn't believe how he was treating me. I was heartbroken all over, and I'm like, "Here we go again." So, I did hire a coach that I worked with, because I was like, I didn't come this far just to give up.
Yeah.
And that coach, I just dove very, very deeply into childhood um, and that was really life changing for me. And did a lot of forgiveness work, did a lot of releasing the
Mm.
past, and that is where like life started to feel really magical. And that's why the work that I do now, it's not just like, surface level self love and
Yeah.
here here's how to get the guy. Like, this is, like, deep work that you're doing, but it's so worth it because that's really, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, how we get to experience what we truly, truly desire.
Oh, yeah. I love that, and it sounds to me like as you were reflecting on this relationship, you realized how vulnerable you actually had to get in order to, like, you
Mhm.
had to break through a
Yeah.
lot of these walls.
Mhm.
And vulnerability is something that a lot of people kind of really, really shy away from. Like, they really, really
Yeah.
tend to avoid it. Why, especially when it comes to relationships, why do you think that
Mhm.
is?
Yeah, I think that ultimately I think fear is in the way because I think there's a fear that we won't be met there, like we
Yeah.
can't be met in that space. And certainly sometimes, yeah, that is true
Yeah.
because and I think oftentimes it's if we are involved with people that actually are incapable of loving us, then, that's one thing to look at. Like, we don't just wanna throw our whole heart out there. We don't wanna have discernment and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think I think and what I've seen with my clients in relationships that are afraid to like open up and communicate, it's 9 times out of 10 a childhood thing.
Mm.
They kind of are triggered back to childhood and they're feeling like they're either talking to their mom or dad and they think that same outcome will will present itself, whether they're dismissed or not understood or misperceived or whatever it is. I think that,
Mhm.
and again, like there's the past. So whether it's a past relationship or just your childhood, which is where we have our attachments form
Mhm.
and you know, has so many direct ties to our adult relationships. That's what I think the main thing is in the way. It's typically the fear of the past repeating in some form. So we get to explore that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I also like to think that relationships aren't, even if you're in a bad relationship or an unhealthy one, a lot of the times whenever you're in relationship with other people, their actions don't reflect anything about you. Right? Like my
Yeah,
actions
it's
don't
so
reflect
true.
anything about the other person. It's a lot to do with
Hmm.
what's happening
Yeah.
internally with each human being. Like we're all having our own human experiences and then coming into relationship with each other and meeting each other in all of these different phases. What would you say are the top 3? Like if somebody is listening to this and they are struggling with a relationship in their lives, whether that be
Mhm.
romantic or otherwise, what would your top 3 pieces of wisdom for them be to open themselves up to the relationships that they actually want?
Yeah, I think it will depend, yeah, a little bit if they're, like, single or in a relationship, but
Yeah.
I think that yeah, that's such a good question. I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm trying not to pour out 2
Yeah.
hours worth of tips."
Right, right.
Um, okay. I think that I would start with self. I would how are
Mhm.
you if you're struggling in relationships, it's taking a look at where are you outsourcing your well-being onto other people
Ooh,
first.
that's a
So
good
it's
one. Yeah,
like
mhm.
yeah, and I think that can show up in dating or a relationship. It's like, well, my partner's not doing this, so I feel this way. And again, people's actions will affect us. You don't have to be a robot, superhuman,
Right.
but taking a look at like where your well being depends on the other people around you is a great starting point.
Mhm.
Starting to check in with yourself. Okay, what do I need right now?
Mhm.
What do I need? What would I say to someone that I loved? What would I do for someone that I loved? And this doesn't have to be like some a huge thing. This can be like, you know, it would really help me to cook something for myself right now and have food for a couple days so that my busy week I feel less stressed. Like that's an act of
Yeah.
self-love. You know, it does like what do I actually need? What do I wish someone would give me and how can I give that to myself so that you can start to fill your own cup and start to come home to yourself because like we were born whole and complete. You know, when you were born, it wasn't like, you're all right. But once you're in a relationship, you'll be worth it. It's like, no, everyone said you were a perfect angel, probably. So,
Yeah.
you know, so it's about returning to wholeness is kind of like step one, so
Yeah.
that you can start to feel good within yourself. It doesn't mean you have to be isolated from support. I think like the second thing is support in some form, I think
Yeah.
is life changing. Like I would not be where I am without the support in my life. So whether that is a coach, whether that's maybe you do have only one friend that really makes you feel seen and heard, like can you lean in there? You know,
Yeah.
start
Mhm.
to if you can't open up well or be met well in relationships yet, where can you start um, that practice? So
Mhm.
getting vulnerable with friends, I still do this. I'll be like, hey, this is coming up. Like I would love to get some reassurance around this, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I've got people that can meet me there. So it's like, you know, friendships, starting to, I know for me, I started to attend free workshops and started
Mhm.
putting myself in environments around people who wanted similar things than me and were like on a similar path.
Yeah.
And I was planting seeds for future friendships, future clients before I even had a business, like 2 years before I
Yeah.
had a business. You never know. Some of my very best friends are women that I attended like a free little workshop with on Zoom or something. So,
Yeah.
starting to lean into support there and starting to really dive into the roots of your unhappiness and where they originated
Mhm.
in terms of the past. What was your childhood experience like? Did you feel seen, heard, and loved? How were you able to receive love there? Like what's kind of missing? Like some sort of inner child connection is a
Yeah.
great starting point, and there's so many layers there. But,
Yeah.
um, I remember the first time I turned on an inner child meditation and I was like head to toe goosebumps,
Yeah.
emotions, all of it. So start small, but I think it's like when, again, you're building your capacity to feel your
Yeah.
emotions in those sense as well.
Yeah. I love the phrase that you use there, like you are building your capacity to feel emotions. Because a lot of times whenever we get older, we have all these old emotions from childhood that we never have like really processed. And so whenever they start
Hmm.
to come up, they're like really frightening and they're like, whoa, that came out
Yes.
of nowhere. Why does it feel this way? Why does it hurt so bad?
Hmm.
And
Yes.
and you going back and addressing some of that stuff in childhood, even if it was something really small. Like I can
Hmm.
guarantee there are things that my parents probably said to me. My parents are awesome. I love them. But there were probably
Yeah.
things
Yep.
that they said to me that like really stuck with me that my subconscious kind of latched onto. And they're like I didn't
Yeah.
really realize how much I was holding on to it until it started manifesting in some of these different ways in my adult life. And so
Hmm.
being able to go back and heal some of those old wounds. I mean, and like I think people can definitely do this on their own with child like inner child meditations and
Hmm.
things like that. But there are also so many other
Yes.
resources out there for you. There's coaches, there's therapists, there's healers. There like you can do this kind of work in whatever modality you have access
Hmm.
to, whatever modality
Yep.
you really resonate with. Like there's so many different
Hmm.
ways. What have you found are the
Exactly.
ways that resonate with you and your clients?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think one-on-one support is the most magical thing. I think we're all so complex, and I think, like, there's no one size fits all for this work. Even if different themes come up, every single client I coach, it's a different, experience, and I think when you're held in a one-on-one space with a coach, I think that is life-changing, and you just get to where you're going so much faster because it's
Yeah.
like you're really able to dive deep. For me, it was, what supported me the most was coaches and being in spaces with like-minded women. So
Mm.
whether that was like trying to get in my community a little bit, attending different networking events or like a women's circle or yoga on the beach or something, like
Yeah, yeah.
starting to think about who do you want to be, right? And like how
Mhm.
can you put yourself in these spaces? I think sisterhood is really healing and I think that I think it dissolves a lot there because I think as women too, we grow up feeling like we have to be against each other and stuff. And so there's a lot of like
Mhm.
relearning around all of that too, because without the women in my life, I just don't know where I would be. And I think it's a missing link on a lot of people's healing journeys as well.
Yeah, totally. Oh, yeah. I feel like there's a lot of other tangents that we could go on here, but
Many, many
yes,
tangents.
many,
I would like,
many. Like relationships are
I'm like, did
so
I say it
layered.
all?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would, I'm answering your questions and I'm like, what did I just say? Because I'm like, ooh, there's so much here. So much
Yeah.
here. But I love it. I love it so much. Clearly, I'm like, I could talk about this for 5 hours probably. So
Totally, totally. Well, is there anything else that we haven't touched on yet, or maybe a topic that we did touch on, but you want to kind of say one
Mhm.
last little thing about anything on your heart right now?
Yeah, so I think something that I could expand on just a little bit more in terms of the past, what helped me was because I think it's like, okay, inner child work, like where do I start type of thing. I think it
Mhm.
can be even helpful to take a look at your last whatever few relationships and start to write the qualities of those people and how they
Mhm.
made you feel and like what the outcomes were. So it's all for me, it was a pattern. So that you can start to see your patterns. You can start
Yeah.
to see like the cycle that you're in. Cause sometimes it can be hard to be like, well, I don't know. I had a great childhood and everything was fine. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you probably did have a good childhood. But the thing about inner child work is it's not about like blaming your parents or trying to
Yeah.
force trauma there if it's not there. But the thing is like as kids, we idolize our parents. Like they
Yeah.
are our world,
Mhm.
and so we're these sensitive little beings that when they come home mad from work or stressed, or maybe they give our sibling more attention or this or that, or, your dad worked all the time and wasn't consistent, like we're internalizing things and making up beliefs about ourselves.
Yeah.
So we're learning, oh, I don't know, men aren't consistent. And it's not like a child's brain is thinking this, but it's like, when will I don't know when dad comes home. So
Mm.
then there's this belief that like men are inconsistent or, they're
Right.
gonna come and go. So let me cling when they're here. Or, it can be as mild as that or as extreme, like if you were abused as a child, or something like that, learning that like the person that loves me is going to hurt me. Like, so starting to like peel back those layers, like what patterns are showing up for you, or it's like in every relationship, I have a hard time expressing how I feel. Let's get curious about that. When else have I
Yeah.
felt that way? When was the first time I felt that way? Like these are kind of the beginning steps. So yeah, just wanted to um,
Mhm.
speak on that. But I think that the biggest takeaway when it comes to creating new outcomes is really like understanding that things can be different. So if
Mhm.
you take one thing, two things away from this: one,
Yeah.
you're worth loving, like you are worth loving yourself, and two, you're not chained to your past. Like you absolutely can create a whole new, not just new relationship outcomes, but just new outcomes in your life. You
Mhm.
do have that power. And I think it's a permission slip that is so worth giving yourself. Like if you're frustrated and defeated and like, what the heck am I? This is just how it's always going to be. Start opening your mind to the possibility that things could be different for you because they absolutely can. And I've seen it
Mhm.
with myself and so many other women.
Mm. So good. So good. Well, where can people find you? What are you up to? How can people
Yeah.
get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I would say like Instagram is the best platform for me. So I know you'll throw the links down at the bottom.
Yeah.
There I'm doing a free workshop at the end of April called Empowered Dating Workshop. So that's going to be all around like how to create a healthy relationship and feel really confident in the dating process. Depending on when this comes out, like that's always something, there'll be a replay available for that as well. And then yeah, I'm always enrolling women for my one-on-one coaching. So it's a relationship wellness coaching program. And yeah, we're diving deep into those pillars of the self-love and the healing and, creating
Yeah.
those authentic relationships.
Oh, so good. Yes, all of those links will be down in the show notes for any of you who want to check out Jenny's work and follow
Mhm.
her. Thank you so so much, Jenny, for being a guest
Yeah.
and for just sharing your heart. I loved hearing you talk so passionately about this because you can tell that this work has really impacted your life and your relationships, and now you get to
Yeah.
help others do that too. And I'm happy to have you share your story here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been super fun. And yeah, I appreciate all your time as well.
Oh my goodness, such an awesome conversation with Jenny. I hope you guys got a lot of value out of that. I love talking about relationships in general, just because I do a lot of that kind of work myself as well. And with my clients, that relationship to ourselves is of utmost importance. It's like the thing that drives our relationship with literally everything and everyone else. So, yeah, check out the show notes if you want to follow Jenny. And for those of you who would like to hang out and get to know me a little bit more, I would love for you guys to sign up for my podcast newsletter and be reminded anytime a new podcast goes live. That link will be in the show notes as well. I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your week. Bye.